The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 marked the end of a superpower and reshaped the global geopolitical landscape. Central to this historic transformation were Mikhail Gorbachev's policies of Perestroika and Glasnost, two reform initiatives that aimed to revitalize the Soviet system but ultimately accelerated its downfall. What was Perestroika? Perestroika, meaning restructuring in Russian, was Gorbachev's economic and political reform program launched in the mid-1980s. Key goals of Perestroika: economic reform, reduce central planning and introduce elements of a market economy, encourage private enterprise, joint ventures with foreign companies, and greater efficiency in state-owned industries. Political reform, decentralize government control, introduce limited democratic practices within the Communist Party and state institutions. Modernization, boost technological development and productivity, integrate the Soviet economy into the global market. Perestroika was intended to strengthen the Soviet Union, but it inadvertently exposed systemic weaknesses and fueled demands for deeper political change. What was Glasnost? Glasnost, meaning openness, was a complementary policy aimed at increasing transparency and freedom of expression. Key features of Glasnost: freedom of speech and press. Citizens could openly criticize government policies, economic failures, and historical injustices. Media gained greater independence, exposing corruption and inefficiency. Political transparency. Government decisions and Communist Party actions became more public. Increased accountability and reduced censorship. Public debate. Citizens were encouraged to participate in discussions about the future of the country. National issues, including economic decline and environmental problems, could no longer be hidden. Glasnost fueled popular awareness of the USSR stagnation, increasing pressure for systemic change. The combined impact of Perestroika and Glasnost. While designed to revive the Soviet system, these policies had unintended consequences. Economic turmoil. Loosening central control led to shortages, inflation, and declining production. State enterprises struggled to adapt to market reforms. Rise of nationalism. Freed from strict censorship, ethnic groups within the USSR pushed for autonomy or independence. Movements in the Baltic states, Ukraine, and the Caucasus gained momentum. Political instability. Glasnost encouraged criticism of the Communist Party, weakening its authority. Gorbachev faced opposition from conservatives resisting reform, as well as radicals demanding faster change. Global influence. Gorbachev's reforms signaled a less aggressive foreign policy, reducing Soviet involvement in Eastern Europe. Countries in the Warsaw Pact began transitioning away from communist rule, culminating in the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989. The collapse of the Soviet Union. By the early 1990s, the combination of economic weakness, political unrest, and nationalist movements made the Soviet Union unsustainable. In August 1991, a failed coup by hardline communists accelerated the disintegration of central authority. By December 1991, the USSR officially dissolved, replaced by 15 independent republics. Gorbachev resigned, marking the end of Soviet communism and the Cold War era. Legacy of Perestroika and Glasnost. Political reform. Introduced elements of democracy and freedom of expression previously unseen in the USSR. Economic lessons. Highlighted the difficulties of transitioning from a centrally planned economy to a market system. Global impact. Ended the Cold War and reshaped international relations. Paved the way for the emergence of the Russian Federation and newly independent states. Cultural influence. Encouraged open discussion of history, literature, and social issues that had been suppressed for decades. Perestroika and Glasnost were bold experiments in reform that inadvertently unraveled the Soviet Union. While intended to modernize the economy and liberalize politics, they exposed deep systemic weaknesses, unleashed nationalist movements, and undermined the Communist Party's authority. These policies demonstrate how attempts at controlled reform can sometimes accelerate the very change they were meant to manage, transforming the USSR from a superpower into a collection of independent nations and ending nearly 70 years of communist rule.